Hello, Star Wars Beyond the Films listeners. This is Nathan again with a little bit more information on some of these Fantasy Flight Games products that were talked about in a previous episode of Star Wars Beyond the Films. For those who are interested in seeing what's available before you drop a lot of money on these things. We're looking this time at the Star Wars Dice app. We'll be checking that out as we go along. This is an app put out by Fantasy Flight for iOS, so for Apple devices, and for Android devices, that essentially acts as a digital dice pool and a place to roll your digital dice. You don't have to carry dice around with you, and frankly, what I think is most important, you don't have to buy a bunch of extra dice, because essentially you can roll as many as you need, more than likely, through this. Granted, eventually the screen fills up, but you're hardly ever going to wind up with enough dice that that's going to make that much of a difference. One thing that you might find here, it's a little odd, is that the X-Wing game, at the time of launch, not only has the original miniatures game, plus the different expansion packs with other ships, some of which repeat ships that are in there with different cards, you also have this whole issue of dice. They initially had planned to put out a separate set of dice as a sort of expansion pack so that each player could have their own set of 3 of each, attack and defense. Well, they kind of got delayed. That wound up delaying some people's pre-orders, as I mentioned in the unboxing of the X-Wing stuff. But these are the dice you're going to wind up using. And if you have the just initial set, you've got 6. 3 of each. The red are the attack. The green are essentially defense. You know, you're kind of maneuvering and such. Each face means something specific to this game. Proprietary dice here. So you need to have those kind of dice, otherwise you can't play the game. Same thing goes somewhat for Edge of the Empire. Now, right now, the Star Wars role-playing game for Fantasy Flight, they've told us there's going to be 3 starter books, all of which have some specific details to them that gear them toward a specific way of playing in the Rebellion era. But this is the first shot at checking it out. This is the beta version that was released in limited numbers for people to essentially try out, give them feedback, and they're now using that feedback to update the game before the final official release. And yes, they are using the feedback, which is really kind of cool. Their feedback response time is amazing, quite frankly, for the beta. Now, think about this, though, is that unlike the starter book that you're eventually going to be able to pick up through Fantasy Flight that they announced very recently that includes the dice, this doesn't include any of them. Instead, to use the various proprietary dice, you are going to wind up using this if you play Edge of the Empire through the beta, or something like it, maybe scanned. What they've done is they've taken every single dice, or die, and they have given you the stuff to take a regular die of that particular shape, however many sides it happens to have, 8, 6, whatever, and you can just put those stickers on it to essentially make your own. Although, frankly, that is a really clumsy way of going about it. I mean, it works well for the beta because it's really just there for testing, but quite frankly, the Dice app is a much better option, especially if you're a collector and you want to keep these things nice and pristine for the future. So, what are we dealing with here? Well, what they've done is they've given us this Dice app. Has Star Wars sound effects, a little bit of Star Wars music, though not much. Help section kind of just runs you through all the basics of what you need to know. Settings allows you to pick backgrounds. I tend to use the Imperial background, but you do have some that are things like scenes with particular characters, like there's the Rebel symbol. There's Luke, and it's a shot, of course, of Luke with the lightsaber and such. Frankly, I like the Imperial one. It makes it nice to see. Sound, you can cycle through different options. Jedi sounds, droid, Rebel, Imperial. Shake sensitivity. You can roll not by pressing the screen, but by shaking the device. Works a lot better if you're using the device that's smaller. So it's something like an iPod as opposed to an iPad, but it still works effectively the same way. What's cool here is that you can also choose which dice you want to use. The Star Wars RPG, right, Edge of the Empire, lots of stickers, uses 7, I was about to say 7? No, wait a second. 7 different proprietary dice along with some other dice of just sort of standard sides for gaming, not necessarily standard for board games, so you may not have them lying around the house if you're not a gamer already. We have here the boost die, the setback die, the ability die, which can be upgraded into proficiency die. You have the difficulty die, you have the challenge die, and then you have the force die. For X-Wing, as mentioned, over here, you have your attack and defense die, and then they have general die of various shapes. so that you can pretty much find whatever you need to not only play this game, but in a lot of cases, other pen and paper RPGs, whether it's the Wizards of the Coast game, West End Games, a Star Wars RPG from the past, or just about anything that you could possibly need, as long as it uses a standard shape dice. If that particular thing happens to use proprietary dice of its own, then yeah, you're kind of out of luck. That's sort of the way that I felt when I was looking at the sheer number of different dice being used for the Fantasy Flight Games projects. They work well. The dynamics of the dice work well. It's just that they are all proprietary. So you're not going to find other ones just laying around the house that you could easily use to replace these without a lot of ingenuity behind it. Might as well just shell out for an extra set of those or the $5 to get this, especially if you have the beta of Edge of the Empire, because it is so much easier than using the stickers. Now, the way this tends to work, when you go to roll, this is how I roll, see, right? You have up here all the different dice that are available. And when you go into that little thing that I just showed you a second ago about active dice, where it showed the different ones, you can actually choose which ones show up on here. So you could choose to take some of these generic ones out if you don't think you're going to use them. Might as well just leave them, though, because all you're doing is essentially just scrolling through. So to start with, on the main screen, assuming you have them all active, you've got essentially just the dice that are going to be used for the RPG. But then right after that, you have your ones for X-Wing before the generic ones. So let's say that I am playing the RPG, and I am going to need 2 ability dice. I just tap it twice. I will have 1 proficiency dice, or die. I will have 2 difficulty dice. I'm getting my singular plurals all screwed up here, aren't I? I'll have 1 challenge die. The force ones don't come into play generally here. That's more of a thing before the game for the most part. I'm going to put at least 1 setback die out there and 1 boost die. So now I've got essentially what would be a whole hand. This is my dice pool according to the terminology of Edge of the Empire is my dice pool. And then I simply tap it. I can choose to select all, or I can choose to invert that selection. I can choose if I select, let's say, oops, I didn't really mean for this proficiency die to be in there. Just hit minus, and it is gone. I can say, wait, nope, I need to add something to it, okay? So you could essentially just, in that case, you just go up here and tap it. Maybe I want to add another difficulty die or whatever. You can go to your presets. You can go back to the main menu, or once you're ready, you smack this, and it rolls them. And if you need to roll them again, roll them again. You might say, well, what if I don't want to roll all of them? Well, you can essentially choose, say, that 1, and it'll only roll that 1, or you can invert the selection. If you don't choose any, yeah, it's going to roll all of them. If you do choose some, it's only going to roll those. So if you have dice that need to be re-rolled, you could do that without screwing up everything else. I will say one thing that is somewhat screwy with these is that sometimes you have modifiers that change one symbol to another, and that in and of itself is not something that's easy to do on the app unless you just essentially take a dice, or take a die, and re-roll it repeatedly until it winds up on the face that it's supposed to have. That's a little hinky right now. It's not that big of a deal, but it is something that's easier with the physical ones. I will say pretty much that outside of that, it's much easier to use the app than it is to use the physical dice. It's just much less crap to carry around all the time. And I'm telling you, when I show you the unboxing of all the specific parts of the X-Wing game, especially the ones that come with this, you're going to find there's a heck of a lot of parts to keep track of to have yet another batch to carry with you. And if you're playing Edge of the Empire, this means a device and a book and maybe your papers, not an extra sack full of at least 7 dice, when really you're probably going to wind up with more by the time it's over with, because your abilities each require, say you got an ability rank of 2, you got 2 ability dice you now have to have, and you better have those, otherwise, again, you won't be able to effectively play the game without constantly re-rolling the same ones. Just pick up the app. Yeah, people gripe, it's $5. Oh my goodness, $5 for an app! We're kind of spoiled as far as the sheer cheap price tags that we find on a lot of apps. But I'm telling you, it is going to be worth it if you're planning on playing any of these. And if you're going to plan on playing all of these, whether it's Edge of the Empire, the miniatures game, or the LCG living card game that they have coming that's not out yet, it really does seem like a no-brainer to wind up picking up the app. So, not a lot of frills. Kind of nice, though. Nice use of the Star Wars license to create something that will be good for all these different games. And hopefully this will help you make your decision if you're going to play either of these and wind up looking for more dice than the game actually comes with. Thank you for viewing, and we will be back in the future with more materials from the Fantasy Flight Games materials, and of course more from Star Wars Beyond the Films at StarWarsReport.com. Thank you.